To call to order the Monday, October 17th meeting of the City of Monona City Council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Moore. Here. Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Thomas.
Here.
Alder Rademacher.
Here.
Alder DeFula.
Here.
Alder Holmquist. Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 29th and October 3rd meetings?
Mayor or Mark, we're not getting any audio on the remote feed.
I don't.
That'd be those guys. I know.
Jake, could you knock on their door? Hang on, we'll check.
There we got it.
Okay. Are we good? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 29th and October 3rd meetings?
So moved. Second.
Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. There are no appearances. There is no public hearing. There is no consent agenda. Moving on to council action items under G1, unfinished business. Consideration of Resolution 22-10-2593, approving the 2023-2027 Capital Improvements Program and 2023 capital borrowing put forth by Mayor O'Connor. Is there a motion to approve the capital
So
budget?
move.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, we have two amendments, both relating to Huska Park. The first one relates to, I had removed this from the budget proposal, returning it, placing it back in the budget for engineering for $50,000 next year. The second one is related to moving the construction to 2024. I had moved it to 2025. It's apparently doubled in price since we were here 2 weeks ago, and it's now $1.4 million. So is there a motion to approve the first capital budget amendment, which is an amendment to add a Huska Park preliminary engineering in the amount of $50,000?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Okay. Alderwood?
Yeah, so this is basically mainly, sort of a timing issue of whether we do it 2 years from now or do it in the next budget. So, yeah, I don't know. Jake can talk more about the project, but Huska Park has been one that has been repeatedly pushed back in capital budgets, I think going back years, I mean, like 10 years. This plan would do a few things. One, it would make significant ADA accessibility improvements. And we did get a spreadsheet that breaks out the improvements. There's not a total on that sheet. It's right after the two amendments in the packet. The cost to do just the ADA improvements would be $330,000, with plus the 25% contingency would make it $412,500. There's a whole bunch of other improvements, one of which I think may be the most important of those additional improvements is the cold storage building. Jake can talk more about that, but I'm pretty sure we're currently storing the ice rink equipment at Steve Doran's warehouse, sort of, I think, free at this point. That's not it's very nice of him to do that, but there's no saying he'll continue to do it. So, I guess just two other things on the ADA part of it. We've got significant facilities, the football field, and when there are games, there will be several hundreds of people in attendance, and there's no accessible route into the field or up to the grandstands. The other thing, I just, thinking about ADA improvements, that I'm not sure what the percentage of people with mobility impairments on any given day is, but I think through a lifetime period, there's a good chance, a lot of us are going to have mobility impairments at one point or another, either temporary or permanent. So with that, Jake, and what else do you want to?
Sure. So when we have a master plan conceptual, this was from 2018, 2019, we get kind of ballpark ideas on what things cost. When I go to do capital and I go for engineering and then construction, the construction amount is a guesstimate by me. This is not like a hard, fast number of what construction costs are going to be. Even this number that we have that was provided by an engineer is not necessarily reliable for 2024 pricing. So we're talking about another budget cycle construction after this. What's included primarily is accessibility and routes into the features that we have. The tennis courts, the baseball field, the football field. The additional pricing we have was for upgrades to those facilities. So there is some pricing for irrigation, for bleachers, for entryway features that aren't necessarily required by law under ADA, and not something that I would say could be in a second phase, for example, or football bleachers would need to be 100% fundraised for by our partner organizations that utilize the field. Same with the baseball field. But I did have an engineer go back through and look a little bit closer for our master plan for kind of the areas that we're looking for to running those calculations on both just the accessible paths to those facilities and then breaking out some of those other components. The one that I would recommend that we do if we are looking at moving forward this project is the playground replacement. It's already at 22 years old, and kind of 18 to 23 is the replacement age of playgrounds. So that one I would probably recommend putting back in if we were looking at phasing it out. The master plan was always going to be phased into multiple construction projects because we have paths around the entire campus in addition to the parking lot that won't be considered in this first phase. So Ahuska is always going to probably be a two-phase type of construction project. So depending on how you want to do it, if you want to do it in this first phase, I think there's opportunities to still stay within that original 750 or even less than that, quite frankly. If we don't do some of the sport field improvements to irrigation access, and look at fundraising for some of the bleachers and site furnishings for those other facilities.
Anyone else have any
That's
questions?
one other thing for Jim.
Doug?
I believe you had other revenues that you thought would be available for, at least for the construction phase. Could you describe what those might be?
Yeah, so this project would be eligible for what we call LawCon grant. So it's through the National Park Service. Applications are made first of each year. Generally, you're notified by August, September if you receive the grant. That does include reimbursement funding for engineering as well. This is more of the active recreation phase. The Knowles Nelson stewardship, which we've talked about before, is more for passive recreation. The federal money that is with LawCon grant is more for the active base. So all of the components within this project would qualify for that grant. It's a 50% matching grant, and generally each state gets. We've been in that $2 to $2.5 million allocated to the state on an annual basis. That's available. We'd also looked at if the TIF was coming online from the project on Broadway, that this would be included in some of the hardscape. Our youth football program has already pledged $50,000 for the purchase and installation of bleachers, and I think they're well well aware that they would have to fundraise 100% of the cost of new bleachers.
And can you address why it's not okay to wait a year?
I think it's important to get this project done in the scope of where our other priorities lie with looking at a potential public safety building and referendum, and that this project, especially, the need is there. And we have to make these improvements by law with the ADA plan. And Ahuska is our most visible park. It serves the most amount of non-residents and visitors and athletic teams. I think pushing it off is what we've done for the last 7 years, and it just keeps getting pushed off.
Didn't you say we just had a plan in 2018?
But getting to that plan was also been pushed back too. So I think it's an easy part to forget because we all live generally in the heart of the city, and we're not on the outskirts, and we don't see what happens at Ahuska on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a weekends. I do see it, and I hear from the people that are participating and coming and visiting and complaining about not being able to get their parents and grandparents to watch their youth football games or tennis matches. I think it's an incredibly important thing to look at specifically this park. But if we wait, we wait. This is why you guys are in charge, and we try to make the best argument to, include it in this year's project and actually make a commitment to getting it done.
Alder Thomas?
Yeah, ultimately, when we do the project, how much of Grand Park was TIFed?
Grand Crossing?
Yeah, about.
I don't even, over $1 million for the
Okay,
park.
and this is where I'm going with that. I know there's some TIF money in here, but that storage building is to store stuff from what I would call a TIF park. And so in looking at the costs, could we not charge more of that building against TIF ultimately?
Bricks and mortars are not considered a TIFable thing, so that would be considered a TIFable expense.
Okay, that's one question. My other question is, I understand that the accessibility issues. Parks are doing this. What about other departments in the city? Are we bound by the same rules, and how come they haven't had?
We are. Public facilities, and after 2010, we did upgrade our public facilities. So that includes push-button access into City Hall. That included making sure that we had an accessible ramp into the community center for voting, for example. So those.
So the rest of the city has been done except for the parks?
I can't give you an answer on that. I'd have to look into it. I'd have to talk to Dan.
Because I don't remember a study on them like we did on parks.
We did not do a study that I'm aware we paid for.
We had a preliminary scope of work through our insurance company that kind of identified low-hanging fruit, not low-hanging fruit, but kind of like major things that would have to get done right away. But this scope of this work for a transition plan was just related to the parks. You certainly could do library, City Hall, other areas that would be available to the public. But generally through renovation, those have been mostly taken care of. But things around campus would still hold true. For example, in the packet that you have, all these half-inch gaps, if there's a gap greater than half-inch or a lip. Now, some of those are just maintenance-related items like that we look for where it's pretty obvious, like, well, I'm going to trip on that big crack. Can we get that area grinded down getting in?
Okay.
But certainly the rest of the city would have to be looked at in the future.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Nancy?
Yeah, I know we received the spreadsheet of everything, or the list, laundry list of everything that needs to be done in parks, but can you give me or give our public a better idea of how long we have to come into compliance?
For all of those.
Sure. Generally, it's the time frame is between, priority items within the next 2 years to 10 years. So the law states that you have to have a plan that's been approved and that you have things in place. So, but 10 years is what MSA has said is kind of what has been settled in court as far as the transition plans.
So we have 10 years to do all of that whole, plus anything that we might have to do with city facilities.
Correct.
The 10 years from the 2020? I mean,
Yeah,
it's 10 years from 2020.
correct.
So
Why is it from 2020?
Well, from when we went into contract, I guess, 2021.
Wasn't that last year?
Yeah.
so it's when you engage in a contract with the company, not when the law.
No, the law was 2010.
Didn't we just engage with them earlier this year in this contract? I mean, after.
Yeah,
the
I mean, it was
budget
approved
passed?
in the capital budget in
So it's
2021.
It
so I
says
think that-
2030 in the report when it's
Yeah.
due. And maybe it's even later.
Yeah, 2030. Yeah.
And just so everyone knows, Dan from MSA cannot make it tonight, so we will not be discussing the ADA plan at this meeting. One question I had, Jake, in looking at the ADA plan, I see under ADA improvements you have listed on this spreadsheet, tennis court accessible railings, but I don't see, for 20,000, but I don't see, and I don't know what the retaining wall is, that's 30,000. I don't see anything about that in the ADA plan at all. So is there additional ADA things that aren't in that plan?
It was
Or what's the-
just labeled accessible route to the tennis court in discussion.
But this is railings.
Correct. In discussion with the engineer about how to achieve
Uh.
getting that into the tennis court, we elongate the slope of a path and create like a spectator seating area with railings for the tennis court. So along with ADA access to the tennis court, a big complaint is spectator seating. And it's not a very wide distance between the existing sidewalk and the tennis court, but it's about a 2-foot slope up. And so you're kind of like sitting back on your lawn chairs while you're watching tennis. And so that is where that quote for the construction is included in that the working thought is you'd have a ramp up to a raised maybe 1.5 to 2 foot to kind of create a flat seating area outside the tennis court along with the accessible route into the tennis court.
Since this is for the benefit of the school district, in terms of seating for the tennis, I mean, most of it is for people coming to tennis matches, isn't it, for the school district? I imagine maybe some people
Yeah,
come
I
and
mean, we
sit
have
there and
USTA
watch
leagues
people
that
play
play
fun,
and-
But for the most part, it's for the school district, right? Have you talked to them about funding any of this?
I think it's going to be part of discussion over facility use agreements with other facilities as well.
Does anyone have any other questions? Brian?
Yeah, Jake, can you talk a little bit about the turf restoration and landscaping in general? One is like the unit price is 25 grand, but then it drops down to 20. That could just be a typo, but
Yeah,
a
I
similar-
think that's just a,
similar question that the mayor had regarding the other item, that there might be a logical connection, I'm just not seeing it.
for what, for landscape?
The turf restoration and landscaping.
Well, those are just standard line items in the construction project for regrading turf that's been,
Okay,
any
so this
seeding
wasn't
and-
specific to like the football field?
No.
Okay.
No, yeah. That'd be that's a general budget number that's put in for all the restoration and seeding and matting that goes into projects.
Anyone else? Nancy?
Yeah, Jake, you've offered that you see Ahuska as kind of a gateway for Monona in terms of overall usage. And yet I think the majority of folks in Monona anyway would see Winnequa as kind of being the central gathering place, whether it's because of the runs and walks that happen or the community festivals. Congratulations on the fall festival, by the way. So can you give us a better picture of like how many nights a week? I mean, we know the farmers market's there, but can you give us a better picture of how many nights a week there's actually big athletic events there in
Yeah.
a given year?
I mean, Tennis, 7 of the 8 courts are used nightly from Memorial Day to Labor Day, whether it be through school district use, invites that happen there, USTA leagues, and general play. We have multiple baseball programs that use the baseball from April until September, and that includes Monona Grove High School, Monona Home Talent Baseball that plays every Sunday or every other Sunday. We host a Latino baseball league, and also Madison Adult Baseball League, so a recreational program. That happens 3 to 4 nights a week. The football field is used by Monona Grove Youth Football. Those games are fall, and those are 2 to 3 nights a week, 2 nights a week plus Saturdays, depending on what the schedules are for home. We've had various other partners for the football field, and those have kind of come and gone. We are looking for kind of a spring partner user group for that field. We have reached out and have had discussions, or at least initial discussions, with One City Schools about future use for developing athletic programs that they're looking at having and space needs that they might have. And certainly shelter rentals that happen, virtually every Saturday. So when we do have events there, they're big. So it's, a one youth football game with 2 teams, or there's usually a back-to-back game. You're looking at 500 to 750 people there between participants and, parents and fans. And so the parking lot ebbs and flows with that, where it just swells up, and we host those, host those events. Baseball games, not nearly as many in attendance, but still, I think enough people that are there as spectators. So it's more of a spectator-centric park with the amount of athletics that it goes on, and just the visibility that's there when those events are taking place from both Broadway and the Beltline.
Anyone else? Doug?
I was just going to say that, because you had said earlier pushing it back 1 year, but actually the budget right now would delay it 2 years.
Well, we're pushing, the engineering was pushed back to 24, and what did you push the construction back to 25?
25, 26. I think.
So engineering at 25?
Yeah.
And then we'd have a good idea of what's happening with the public safety building, which is, as we know, will be a huge expense.
Plus we have our TIF money, if we know where the TIF is going at that time.
True, because we probably won't have the TIF next year. Anyone else? Oh, Nancy?
Sorry, Mayor, I guess, I'm, as I spoke last time and still, of course, I'm, as we all are, invested in ADA accessibility in our parks. But I have to say that I'm personally struggling with all the unknowns. It seems like, as was pointed out, to go from 750,000 to 1.4 in the last 2 weeks, to not knowing how much TIF money might be available, to not knowing really what other grant sources might be available, to not having spoken to the school, even though they're using all of those facilities a lot, not just, not just the tennis courts, but it just, I don't know, it just seems like there's enough there that I'm reticent to approve the amendment. I'd rather have some more solid figures. It's my own thought.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, the first vote then will be just on the 50,000 for the engineering for next year, moving that ahead a couple of years. So, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Hey,
Alder Rademacher. I'm going to say nay. Alder DePula.
Nay.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Moore.
Nay. Motion fails. Doug?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if we only did the accessible route part of it, would we, do you have an idea what the engineering would be for that?
I thought that was an option, and I guess that's, so Aldermore, with so many unknowns, I'm kind of
So-
sitting here feeling like I have a lot of,
Well, that's kind of what I was looking for, too.
yeah.
I mean, the First Amendment was was engineering for the whole thing. So, I'm assuming if we were just gonna do the ADA improvements, then it would be a lesser amount.
Right.
Kathy?
So there, I think some are thinking that we may want to do the ADA stuff. We may not have the information, but we can amend the capital budget when we get the details, anytime up to when we do the borrowing. That's one point. The other thing is, since there's TIF money in there, we can always use the TIF money to do the engineering without doing the borrowing. So even though we might not approve things tonight, we can do things up until we would do the borrowing.
Sure.
And I've checked that out with Mark to say, some people want more details, they want more information. Can we do this up until you put the borrowing package together? And yes, indeed, we can. And I think there is a lot of interest in looking at some of the ADA improvements. So I don't think that if it doesn't pass tonight, doesn't mean that we can't pursue some more details, more information, and specifically what we want, and decide to do it up until we do the borrowing, because we can always amend capital.
Patrick?
Well, that's what I want to make sure, too. I want to make sure that we're not just killing the whole thing.
No.
Because that's not what I intend to do.
We're not killing it. All we're doing is moving it back. Or you could
Yeah.
vote on doing it, voting for the engineering in a couple months. When we have a better idea maybe of what all these things will cost.
Well, we have a good, I don't think that's.
Well, I don't know how
that's
good
not
the idea is. It changed, it doubled in 2 weeks.
Well, you heard the explanation
Yeah,
was, the
Jake
first number
offered,
was
yeah.
Jake's number, and the second was,
Well, I didn't hear that it was the engineers necessarily.
But it was from the original estimate was from a very long time ago, is how I'm interpreting what Jake said.
Did you have a question, Teresa?
How do we move forward with just the ADA component?
Well, we don't right now. We need to,
You can do that.
We're gonna do it.
Anytime till we do the borrowing.
you could do an amendment now if you want, or you could do an amendment in a month. Patrick?
This is difficult because I feel that we should be taking care of the things that we have before we take on new things right now. But the overwhelming cost of this in comparison to everything else that's coming up causes me concern. But I understand on behalf of the parks why this is so important, because once we get into the public safety building and everything else, it's going to be less likely that we do this, at least on this scale, I would think. So I guess this is, the whole subject is slightly troubling for me because I want to take care of the ADA stuff. I want to take care of the facilities that we currently have. But how, I guess there's that's municipal government right there.
We are doing some ADA things in the budget.
Mm.
It's not that we're doing nothing.
and we are, at some point, we're going to have to do
Right.
these, so, and
I mean, because Ahuska looks pretty shabby in general.
Well, yes, it needs to have its weeds trimmed for one thing. But, yep.
So what is the cost of just moving forward on the ADA changes?
We don't know that for sure.
And that's the whole concern, is that we just don't have,
All, some,
oh, I see.
I think we have.
I thought there was
Well,
perhaps
we
like
have some
a
numbers.
half.
A bleacher slab, do we want to do a bleacher slab?
It's
That's
still
an
going to be
ADA.
$50,000. So
Okay.
the bulk of the engineering work is associated with
With
the ADA.
ADA, okay.
All of this, everything else is incredibly simple. Talking about playground installation or irrigation systems, those are all simplistic. So the bulk of the work in this engineering plan is for the paths and the grading and the drainage, et cetera.
And is there any way to reduce the scope of the engineering work so that it's just focused on ADA?
Yeah, I mean,
Related.
that's it would still be like 50 grand.
It would,
Yeah, because
even with a smaller scope,
I mean, the extra scope are all
is
not tiny.
insignificant.
Insignificant,
Okay, it's
right.
not affecting the price. Okay. So the engineering study is 50K, and then there are the changes themselves that would need to be made.
Well, the actual work itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We generally do the engineering one year, the work the next
The work
year.
the next year.
I personally don't think it looks real great to be doing a huge park project the same year that we're
Yeah,
going to
I know.
referendum for this enormous public
When
safety
people are going to be
building.
howling.
And that has nothing to do with being able to walk and chew gum at the same time. It's just the reality of looking at the numbers.
I knew I was going to regret saying that as soon as I said it.
Alder Holmquist and then Alder Thomas.
No, I was just pointing.
Oh, okay.
Jake, the matching grant of 50% is, when you're going in, just hypothetically, if we were to approve something for engineering for 2023, can the application for the grant funds to cover the engineering of up to 50% happen just for the engineering part prior to any approval of construction costs?
Yes, this is what I was trying to advocate for and recommend to this body, is you approve the engineering project, we go and apply for the grant and see if we get the grant before the 24 capital budget is funded and approved. At that point, we would know whether or not we got a grant that would include for that. But as you know, if a project is not approved in the capital budget, it is very difficult to move past that as a budget amendment. And that's why when we ask for these as amendments, it is a commitment from this body to see that project move forward. But yes, that would be the ideal situation. It's approved in the capital budget for funding. We can work with the engineering team to apply for the grant. Those are May 1st. Generally, you're notified mid-August, early September on whether or not you're awarded the grant. That matches up nicely with the 24 capital budget proposals. We won't be putting that out to bid anyway until January or February of 24 for a spring project. So there would be some clarity on whether or not the city would receive that grant funding before we'd actually go out for even bids, even to consider moving forward with a project.
In the application for the grant, the items that are listed in the top half of the spreadsheet that are referenced as more ADA focused, are those eligible components or are only the items
Yeah.
towards the bottom?
No, they would be. They would be eligible components.
So even if our scope was much smaller, more tailored to ADA components, and some of those additional items that are more simple, really could be much more connected to fundraising or our partner agreements. We all got a slew of emails about the importance of wind screens on tennis courts and the orientation of our tennis courts, of why the high school plays here and why they don't play on their own courts. Has to do with the orientation of it. So there are elements on the bottom that are easier to address in other ways. And I still advocate and Mark, I don't know the procedural way to do this after some additional clarity of the amendment. And how much substantial difference does it need to be compared to the amendment that was just voted on?
I mean, if you wanted to
Redo the amendment?
Yeah.
I think you just would have to totally have to.
Somebody who voted in the majority would have to move to reconsider.
Yeah.
That,
Kathy?
Yeah.
that the engineering piece is not dependent upon the capital borrowing, because you could always use, we've got $100,000 proposed for TIF, which means it's TIF allowable. At any time, we can use TIF money to pay for the that half of that 100,000 to pay for that engineering. I mean, that's an easy piece for this group to approve at any time. But for me, part of the clarity is I'm still, I'm not sure why we didn't get accurate numbers the first time, and I understand because they were different people, but it was the capital budget and we should have had it. And I have a great deal of respect for what you do, Jake. I just sometimes disagree with you and you disagree with me, and that is the way it goes. But when there was the million, the $1,450,000, it wasn't clear to me that what you were really thought we should do is the engineering piece. The engineering piece is an easy thing to do. I mean, you do the capital because you have to figure out what your borrowing package is and all of that stuff. If we use TIF, we don't have to borrow for it. So it's not anything I labor over not doing. I just don't know. I still am not clear on what ADA requirements we will do. If we will do all right now, if we will do part, if we will do some, if this is another step. And I don't know if we can do this and move 2 years out. We can do the engineering and fund it the same year. So my angst is that I'm not sure what all is in. I see the number, it's 335. Do I want to do all of those things, and are those all accessible? Perhaps, but maybe there are things in other parks that are just as important that I want to do. I just don't know about the accessibility pieces. And that's my dilemma.
Nancy?
Yeah, so Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding as it relates to the lock-on grant is that the city would have to make a commitment to match the funds before the state would actually receive the grant. Is that not the case?
You have to make a resolution to apply for the grant, saying you're committed to doing the project and funding the project, yes. And then it's a reimbursable grant. But what I'm saying is the grant award notification would happen before we would go out to borrow or to go out to bid the project. And then it's a reimbursable grant after that.
Right, but we would have to commit to the project, even if
In the
it's by
grant
resolution, we
application.
would have to commit to the whole project. If we were interested in getting 50% of 14 whatever, we would have to commit to the whole project before they would even consider the grant.
Yeah, as part of the resolution to apply for the grant, yes. Yes.
Teresa?
I just want to thank you, Jake, for patiently explaining things. I think, speaking for myself only as a new council person, there's just a lot of learning that happens, and we just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and making the right decisions. And I don't think anyone is against parks. There's just a lot of unknowns, as Alder Moore said. And if you feel that there aren't a lot of unknowns, that's maybe just a gap between where I am and where you are, because you breathe this stuff, you live it and breathe it every day, and you are an expert on it. So any education you could provide would be helpful.
Anyone else?
I just had one other comment. I think that when we have a chance to go over and listen to the reports and get clarity, that will provide I think the opportunity for some of us to figure out what it is we want to do and proceed with some of this. But it's very hard. I mean, I read the whole report, took me all day, because I'm a slow reader, and trying to understand this stuff. But it's really, I think it's unfortunate that we didn't have the ability to do that before we had to act on this. And I think when we have that, it will give us some clarity. And that's not, if that comes up soon, then we can look at the engineering and doing it. That's my,
And I certainly think, I read the report today too, that there's plenty of stuff we can do next year. It's not that we're not doing anything for ADA next year. A lot of stuff that the staff can do. So we will be moving forward with it, regardless of what happens here about this particular project. Alder Wood?
Yeah, I mean, we will, in fact, there's the Pathway project in Oracle Park is
Right.
not just about, it's about ADA accessibility, it's about accessible. So just trying to read the tea leaves here. If there's interest in doing the engineering, putting it in the budget, because it needs to be in the budget, no matter where we get the money from. Then, like I said, somebody who voted, who was in the majority, would have to move to reconsider that. The second amendment that I had was to move the whole thing up to 24 from, or to, yeah, 24. That could, that was for the entire amount. If the council only wanted to do the ADA part of it, the 4 and 12, 5, I could do that too, or not do anything. But it needs to be somebody who voted in the majority to do that.
To bring back the engineering.
Yeah.
Just one clarifying point. On the funding source sheet, and I'm looking at the sheet from last time, so maybe it's a little different. Alder Thomas keeps helping us kind of point back to the TIF that's associated on here, the 100,000. Are you referencing the TIF that we're anticipating with Broadway development?
There's two things in this. The TIF that we're talking about for this 50,000 would be TIF 6. The remaining would be from the new TIF. So, because I don't want to use more than 50,000 for TIF 6 because it's a donor district right now.
And that's the original Ahuska TIF?
No, that's the clinics.
The clinics, okay.
It's within a half-mile type situation.
Okay.
I don't know if you know what the half-mile is. So.
Yep. As a bird.
But the biggest thing that I would worry about TIFs in general is we have a huge project coming, basically redoing Broadway from Bridge Road all the way down to Stoughton. So I would think where you want to justify is, do you want to not spend it on Ahuska, or do you want to spend it on Broadway? I mean, that's something that we'll have to.
This will be obligated to pay our share, right?
Yeah, so that'll be a bigger cost, would be the Broadway.
That's not in the CIP.
It's in the CIP in 2000, I don't know what year it is, but it's in there like 3 years.
Mayor?
I think Patrick get it.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
I can't
Alder
see.
DeCouler was waiting. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just resting on my.
Oh,
And we're in like a big line.
Yeah.
I was just going to sort of like, for my own brain, make sure I understand. So, Ahuska Park, $1,000,004. That's the final number. Before that happens, there's an engineering study, 50,000. Before and that's necessary, the engineering study, before any of that other work can happen. Before the engineering can happen, it's got to be in the budget. If we don't vote on it tonight to put it in the budget,
You do it in 2 weeks, you can do it in a month, you can do it in 3 weeks.
Yeah, we
could
can
do
amend
it.
the budget
You
later.
can amend the budget anytime.
so
Yeah.
we're not missing out.
Or we could move for
Tonight is not
reconsideration
a
tonight.
massive fork in the road that puts us at it. The door will not be closed if we.
No, you can amend the
Okay.
capital budget anytime.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not going to put 1.4 in the capital budget for next year.
Got it. Right, right.
50,000 is another
Okay. Thank you.
story. Patrick, did you have something?
No, I'm just leaning on my.
This is hard. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff we'd
It
like
is.
to do,
I
we
mean,
should do, and we need to.
I'd almost,
we've got a
I'm
list
considering
of
moving for
priorities.
reconsideration for it, right?
Nancy?
Yeah, so, is there any possibility that an engineering study that was done this year, let's just say the construction doesn't happen until
Right.
25, or
Yeah, is the study still going to be valid?
is the study
Yeah,
still going to be valid?
That's what I'm, yeah.
And it's just a year's difference.
It's,
Yeah.
just so we're clear, it's not a study.
Right,
These are
right,
engineered
right,
design.
right, I don't mean,
sorry.
I don't mean study, I mean,
Topographic site surveys
Right.
and developing plans that are ready for construction. So if this was a site that would have rapidly changing conditions, topographics, big hills, changes, then I would say, yeah, but given Ahuska and the way that it's a primarily flat facility, that those aren't going to change that much. So you do the engineering, you'd like to, the engineers will probably say, well, you need to do it within X amount of time because otherwise, our stamp, we may not want to stamp it to say it's certified because they get worried about puddles forming in areas where puddles are supposed to form, et cetera. But I wouldn't be as concerned about that, about it being invalid.
It would have some cost. Every time we've done something like that, there's always been.
Right, it gets modified, just
Modified
if it's got to
costs.
get reviewed in 3 years from when they did it.
right, I mean, there's a reason why we do back-to-back, and that's
Yeah.
precisely because we want it stamped and we don't want to pay the extra to have it modified.
And your opinion of probable cost is a lot more accurate than too.
Right.
You're only saying, I'm going through this whole plan and looking at all of this year's construction totals and, kind of formulating to what I think it's going to cost next year versus, forecasting 4 years out is difficult.
Right.
There's just a lot of unknowns and pricing.
This 1.4 are numbers that you just got this week from the engineer, and they're based on 24 numbers, what is best estimate?
Correct, yeah. And I would say, looking at them, and, we kind of went over them together, they're conservative, they're conservative, and we try to be conservative so we can be as, maybe it's 1.2 or 1.1, but
Sure.
you don't want to, underestimate something like that. But the overall thing, you guys, is it's always challenging. Like, and, this is year 15 of capital budgets, and when we always have something else happening that's important. It's a road project, it's a regulatory stormwater project. There's always something that's going to be on the docket. And we've been fortunate to have, strong leaders, including Mayor O'Connor in the past, that has, put money into the capital budget for park improvements and park additions. This one's tougher because it's an existing park that, in the big scheme of things, isn't that old. It was primarily constructed in 99, 2000. But when you look at it in the lens of an accessibility and a walkability in terms of what we'll be seeing over the next month, it's certainly my opinion, and the Park and Rec Board did rise to the top as a relevant, project for design. So the challenge from our end, on the staff end, is when it doesn't get included in the capital budget, the idea of capital amendments, they're tough. It's a tough sell, and it's a tough sell to this body, and you will have been here before, you understand that. That is, so why did we get this in the capital budget? And then all of a sudden we have the next fire, the next thing that happens, and here we go, on another calendar cycle of not being able to have certainty or some ability to say to our user groups and our constituents and our residents that this project is in the works.
Doug, did you have something? Of course, most years when we make these decisions, we don't have a huge public building project coming up. Just want to keep that out there. Anyone else? I guess to move forward then, do we just not consider your other amendment then, or do we need to vote on that anyway, since engineering's voted down?
I don't see,
Just withdraw.
Just withdraw it?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next item, 1B.
We got to vote on the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to vote on the budget. Jake, could you stick around so you could explain this pickleball thing to us? We'll let you do that. In fact, I'll put off having Dan talk if you can just give us 5 minutes, or Brad, or whoever's doing it. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the capital budget with the clerk please call, as it is now. With the clerk please call the roll.
Alder Thomas. Aye. Alder Rademacher.
Aye.
Alder DePula.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Moore.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. I know, I'm sure all of you have read we've gotten numerous emails about pickleball, and I just asked Jake if he could kind of explain to us what's going on, because when I got the first email, I had no idea what they were talking about. So if you could just explain.
So glad you asked, Mayor, because I was wondering the same thing.
What happened that this
So this is my director's report, and then I will be leaving. So yes, you received a lot of emails over the weekend. I did email the mayor and Alder Wood and DePula regarding the challenges that we're having with just demand and supply of the courts at Winnequa for pickleball and tennis and park and rec play. And so we've had a large group form pre-COVID and during COVID, and that has expanded exponentially in the mornings, 7 days a week. And over the past year with the popularity of pickleball, there's been some conflicts with just use and when people can play, what are the criteria for playing in a morning group, and tennis players upset that there's pickleball nets and that there's no time to play. And so we've been working with this large social group on trying to classify them, whether it's just play, like you would go call up your friends and go play with a couple people, but it's turned into a group of over 100, and what constitutes a group that would require a facility use agreement for basically exclusive use of a facility. This is happening all over Dane County with the addition of dedicated pickleball courts and kind of challenges with formed organizations. So there's a Capital Area Pickleball Association, so there's an official association, there's lots of social, less official, but still heavily organized or heavily communicated with on where and when they're playing, including different apps that now are being used to book courts at certain facilities, including ours, without getting permission, conflicting with tennis lessons. We've had conflicts with individuals berating our instructors that they should be allowed to play at the same time as our kids program. So all of this has come into lots of discussions about pickleball and tennis and what's equitable use of courts. So we are going to be putting a survey out tomorrow to kind of the Pickleball Nation and tennis and Monona residents and beyond. What are your thoughts? What would an equitable format look like? Should there be open play Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays? Should there be a membership-based, fee-based, pay to play? Should the courts be treated like the pool? Should there be tennis only, pickleball only? So we have all sorts of opportunities, but I think when we approach what I would call the organizer of this group, I think there's been a lot of cart before the horse, and a lot of communicating and sending impassioned emails to y'all about what should or shouldn't be done. We're just at the very beginning, so we would be looking at a survey followed by a staff proposal. We have a couple proposals of what something could look like in a format, but that really wouldn't be until a couple meetings or more at Parks and Recreation Board. By ordinance, the ordinance states that any policies or rules regarding use of tennis facilities in Monona can be approved by the Parks Board. So this generally would be a Parks Board decision by ordinance, but I would anticipate it would be a November, December type of anything actionable. But we will be moving our meeting, our Parks Board meeting was supposed to be election night, November 8th, and so we're looking at November 9th. Alder DePula has maybe a potential conflict with transit, but I think you'll find a way to make it to Parks Board for that meeting. So right now it's going to be Wednesday, November 9th, 6:30, and we're hoping to book the forum room over here at the library. So
it'll be like a public meeting, or you
Yeah.
a lot of people show up.
yeah,
Kind of be like the dog park meeting.
yes,
Nancy?
Yeah, so I just, in relation to this, I know, like us, you don't like having to necessarily reinvent the wheel, and so I'm assuming that there may have been, even though this seems to be a newer thing for this area, certainly pickleballs in warmer climates has been around for a really long time. It's just hard for me to believe that there couldn't be other models, you know, that are already out there that you wouldn't have to create from scratch in terms of how to, sharing, no?
Yeah, but as you know, Monona is unique. And so we take models and try to put them into a Monona mold, and that doesn't always work. So we have multiple models and options that would be available, but we want to give everyone their opportunity to voice their opinion and their thoughts. And, you know,
Sure, I'm not suggesting you wouldn't, I was just suggesting that you said that you had, you know, the staff had come up with a few things already. I'm just wondering if you had reached out to other communities that have been in the pickleball business a lot longer,
Yes, of
or
course.
with shared courts
Yes.
or whatever. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So 3 big public meetings coming up, Transit, San Damiano, and pickleball.
Yeah,
Who would have
And two
thought?
transit meetings.
yeah,
Who would have
okay.
thought?
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions?
Make it be wicked.
Does anybody have any questions for Jake about this? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If you drive by there pretty much any morning, you'll see the group out there.
Yeah, I
I mean, they really are
It's a great game.
dedicated.
Said those old people can be wicked.
Yeah.
It's not just.
I say that as an old person.
Well, what I find amazing is they're there in January cleaning off the courts.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
quite something, so.
It's a fun game.
It's the Florida Wannabes.
Yeah, right. Okay, we will move on to Dan so he can get off his screen too. Item 2 under unfinished business, I'm sorry, item 1B, consideration of resolution 22-10-2591, award of contract for sanitary sewer mainlining project put forth by the Public Works Committee. Is there a motion to approve this?
This is just first read.
Second read.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. I'm lost. Go for it.
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. We did receive the recommendation of the Public Works Committee at our October 5th meeting, and this is the second reading tonight for this project. In summary, Visitor Sewer provided the low bid for $136,270 and an alternate bid price of $1,000 that we're seeking your approval on for. I don't have any other updates.
Any questions for Dan? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Alder Rademacher.
Aye.
Alder DePulo.
Aye.
Alder Holmquist.
Aye.
Alder Moore.
Aye.
Alder Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to new business. Item 2A, consideration of resolution 22-10-2597, approval of revisions to the Monona Police use of force policy put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
Move approval.
This is just first reading.
Oh,
Chief.
Vote today. No, this is important stuff. So thank you all. At my request and after review and vote for approval by the Public Safety Committee, this is one of 3 policies that we'll be presenting Council for approval. Again, this is Lexipol providing us policies and us looking into them, comparing them to our current operating procedures, looking at trends, looking at statute. We've made our recommendations, some changes, and here I am asking for you to give inputs, and then we'll look into approving that at the next meeting. So this is the first one we're looking at is use of force.
Cedric, did you want to say a little bit about it, or?
Happy to do so. In terms of meats and potatoes, you're not talking any significant change to the substance of how we operate. We're bound by case law. We're bound by state statute. Our reporting requirements are bound by statute. And so what is, I think, most important here is some carryover language per statute and as was reviewed and mandated by this body, and according to state statute, there's some language that's important after 2020. So the duty to intercede and report, it is actually a misdemeanor offense for police officers who do not intercede and report when they observe use of force that is unreasonable or unlawful. Others is adding language to chokeholds and making sure that that is clear, that that is the same level as deadly force, because it is. So it's highlighting the importance of certain segments of the use of force policy as that. And I believe this Lexipol policy is a lot more easier flowing than our current policy, which is in our general orders. And this is, again, sort of standard language used by a lot of our the state and national accredited law enforcement agencies, which we are not for a variety of reasons, but this is sort of top bar language.
Anybody have any questions? Nancy?
I do, yeah. Chief, thank you again for wading through all this SOP stuff, as you know. We all really appreciate it. So, as you know, back in, June 2nd, several years ago, as a result of that incident, June 2nd incident, we hired, Riesling Group to do a study, if you will, of our SOPs, and clearly one of their recommendations was to clean up our SOPs, so that's a good thing. But one of the things that they talked about in that study, that report, was the difference between what's trained and what's trained at the academy, what is considered to be best practices, and then what would be considered to be emerging practices, right? Which generally sort of as a framework, and then within that there was a paper in the back of that report regarding the use of force, and in there they used a definition that's very different than the definition that you've got here. It didn't just relate to equipment. Their definition was any use of force that creates a substantial risk of causing death or serious bodily injury as the definition, as opposed to specific equipment. And so I'm wondering, I'm assuming that that's one of the as you've been getting feedback from Lexipol, recommendations from Lexipol, that may be one of the things that you've looked at, and I'm just wondering, how you personally are squaring those two and why you're choosing to go this route rather than...
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that.
Sure.
And actually, let me point out that if you look at the deadly force definition, we're actually changing it from what Lexipol recommended we utilize. And the reason we're doing that is because we use DOJ language, the Wisconsin Department of Justice language. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that I've been looking to do consistently as it relates to sort of what officers are bound by, right, and our practice. And it also presents some complexities. I'm not the lawyer in the room, but potentially some complexities when you compare policy to DOJ's, to statute and DOJ language. Mm-hmm. So what DOJ is training, that's the language in which we use in this policy. If that language changes sort of dramatically, I think you'll find me again in front of this body asking for recommendation to change that definition.
Right.
So in an instrument, I think a lot of people think of that as sort of concrete terms, like, a billy club, which is a bad term, a baton, or, a chair. An instrument can also be my arm, or my fist, or my head. Right. Instrument of my body.
Mm-hmm. Alderwood.
Well, that clarifies, because I had a question about the same language, but that does clarify that piece of it. I was actually more focused on
the manual, or the LASP manual. And we also looked, I just want to make sure that, we also looked beyond sort of Lexipol. We looked at other accredited agencies throughout the state that have sort of, again, that standard that they have to meet to retain their accreditation. And so we looked at some of their policies, which they use Lexipol. But there's, slightly different here and there. The consistent thing has been these definitions that we inserted. And so I think what's important to highlight when you look at our current pursuit policy, I had an incident, just a quick story time, if you allow me. I had an incident in which the city actually, a resident was a victim of a burglary. She was home when her home was burglarized. And when she was home, the suspects entered, rifled through some things, and actually confronted her briefly, found the keys to her car, which was not too far off from the garage, got in her car and fled. An officer Monona officer responding to the call actually spotted her stolen vehicle. Our policy, the way it is written now, rather strictly black and white in that sense, did not permit that officer to pursue that vehicle or attempt to pursue that vehicle in the middle of the night when nobody was around. So of course, I visited that victim of that crime who was understandably pretty shaken up still. And I had to give her a reason why she knew that the officer had spotted that vehicle. I had to sit in her living room and explain to her why that officer was not permitted to pursue. Well, because that offense in and of itself is a theft offense, where nobody was injured. Yes, I would argue, however, that breaking into somebody's home, there's a potential for violence to occur. But in the act of stealing her car in and of itself, that in and of itself was not a violent act. Therefore, officers were not permitted to pursue. I struggle with that. I think that we have a duty to try to do something. We have a duty to try to apprehend the person responsible for committing a felony in our community. When it comes to the point where the risk is too high to the community at large, in which the driving behavior becomes too dangerous, or the speeds, for example, become too dangerous, or driving on the wrong side of the road, we are duty-bound to terminate that pursuit. Right? I think that that's reasonable. What we're seeing here is because of our limitations in our pursuit policy, for a variety of reasons, this came to be, and I understand it. I come from Madison, which has, I think, a more strict policy than even our current policy. We had 6 vehicles flee from us this month, or in September. That's not unusual. In fact, there's usually 6, 7, or 8 vehicles that flee from us. This is an area-wide problem. And it's becoming the known trend where folks know that police in Dane County aren't going to pursue you if you do something. Milwaukee tried this for a while. I'm not sure if you're aware. Milwaukee went to a quasi-no pursuit policy. Their carjackings went through the roof. Their violent crime related to car incidents went through the roof. They have since changed their policy back to where officers are at least able to attempt to try to get the car back or to apprehend the suspect. And when the behavior is so egregious that it endangers the life of residents or citizens, then you shall terminate that pursuit. That is what this language is going back to. You do have that opportunity, and I would argue you're duty-bound to at least make an attempt, but when the driving behavior is such or the circumstances are such that it endangers the life of others at a risk too greater than what you're chasing for, you shall pursue. You shall stop. You need to terminate.
Alder Wood and then Alder Thomas.
So I know we spent a lot of time in particular working on the when to initiate a pursuit and I guess when to terminate it. So is the language that's in here, for example, on page 35, the 307.3.1, is that our current language that we adopted?
It's,
Or is that, because it's not, there's no indication that anything's been changed?
right. So our current policy, so let's go to what you're looking at first. The Lexipol policy lists under 303.31 when to initiate pursuit. You're given sort of circumstances where it's A through I as an item, right? Our current policy is A through E. And I'll read through these briefly, okay? Our current policy. Vehicle pursuits are justified when the initiated officer knows or has probable cause to believe, A, the occupant is committing or about to commit a violent felony like an armed robbery, reckless endangering safety, and other crimes against persons in which violence is an element of the felony offense. Or B, the specific vehicle used in or taken during the attempt or commission of a violent felony, armed robbery, reckless endangering, and other crimes against persons in which violence is an element of the felony. Or C, the vehicle or occupants present or present a clear and immediate threat to the safety of others, and which creates a high probability of death or great bodily harm, and therefore the necessity of immediate apprehension outweighs the level of danger created by the vehicle pursuit. In other words, misdemeanor shots fired incident in which a specific vehicle is described as being involved. D, the necessity of immediate apprehension outweighs the level of danger created by the vehicle pursuit, as in the case of the vehicle operating in a manner prior to the attempt to stop, which creates a high probability of death or great bodily harm. However, fleeing at high speeds and or driving in a reckless manner alone does not justify continuing a pursuit, particularly if innocent third parties are put at risk. And then finally, E, a refusal to stop pursuit, as previously defined within this general order, may be initiated and maintained for a lesser offense than described above. However, once the refusal to stop pursuit becomes a fleeing and eluding pursuit, justification for the pursuit must meet the criteria for a fleeing and eluding pursuit, which I just described.
So I would ask, we need that language in our packet next time, because this is then dramatically changing that language that we had spent a lot of time developing, both with the committee and here. We need to see that language compared to what's proposed.
Okay, I will add a link to that. That's published for everyone to see.
Oh yeah, well, this is our packet that we use to prepare for the meetings. It needs to be in there.
Okay.
Right, I guess I was assuming where corrections have been made or changes, those also indicated changes made from our current policy, but it's only changes that you made from Lexipol.
The Lexipol policy.
So we really don't have a strict red line of changes from our current policy.
Correct. Our policy is currently published, currently available for
Right. But do you have a red line of our current policies to reflect the
It
changes?
is entirely different. The format's different, the language is different, so there would be no way to redline this policy.
But could you print it out?
I have it here, yeah. I can certainly make it available.
We can put it in the packet next time.
Yeah.
We'll get it.
I was,
Alder Thomas?
Yeah, if I am correct, do I recall that at the meeting you said that other communities, police departments were also switching to the new thing because people who do these things find out where you can get away with things. And so if we become an island, I'm going to say to myself, well, why would I go to Cottage Grove when they're going to chase me? But I'll go to Monona and they won't chase me. And you become an island where you become known. And we have a significant number already, do we not, of vehicles that are stolen and difficult to pursue. I mean, so you sort of don't want to set yourself up as a situation where you become the target because you're easy.
And to answer your question is yes. We're not on an island doing any changes on our own. There are other communities adjacent to us that are looking into it as well.
Teresa?
so to Alder Wood's comment earlier, I'm under the impression that our Monona specific policies are being replaced by more state standard Lexipol policies. And I
Well, it's what's
don't
being
believe we
proposed.
are going to have two sets of policies.
But it's
but-
replacing our current policy. That's why I'm saying
Correct.
we need to see that.
So you're saying if it's going to replace it, show me the current policy that it is replacing. That's okay. Okay.
And I think you would see that this policy, if you look at, I read off A through E, the policy that Lexipol's proposing and what I'm asking for is A through I. It's adding additional, not subtracting.
Got it.
Alder Thomas.
Yeah, and I would remind the council that we hired Lexipol because we sort of had a mishmash of policies before because the chiefs really didn't have the time nor the background to be the chief and to write all the policies. And we struggled through this a lot at the time of the incident because there was a lot of emotionalism, and we hired Lexipol because, one, they would tell us what was in the best interest of the community and the police department, and they would protect us against future legal entities by not having appropriate and reasonable and sensible policies.
And I thank you, Alder. And I would just add, just for information again, that Lexipol is a partner with our insurance provider. So these are policies that have been vetted through our insurance provider.
Anyone else? Alder Moore.
Yeah, I would just say in relation to the current policy that you just read, Chief, I mean, it seems to me the primary thing that's egregious there in terms of is that it specifically states that something violent, a violent felony or violent crime or is, and almost like striking the violent, if it's a felony, if it's a, just that, it's that violent piece, right, that holds you back.
Violent felony necessarily.
Right, exactly, right. Because if the word violent wasn't there, if it was, if known to have, or suspected to have, committed a felony, then you would be able to pursue if somebody stole a car.
Although if you were being robbed and you were home and you encountered them, you might think it was violent.
Well,
I would.
robbery is a violent crime. Robbery versus burglary of an occupied home, where no violence took place between the homeowner or his suspect, would not then there fall into a violent offense. I would argue, yes, I would feel violated, and therefore there's a likelihood of violence if the homeowner was armed, for example, and was fearful of his or her life because of X, Y, and Z. That instrument presents violence in and of itself.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to C, consideration of resolution 22-10-2599, approval of revisions to the Monona Police Medical Aid and Response Policy, put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
So this was asked to be reviewed by a former alder, and I think that the intent behind adding that was as it relates to our duty to render aid. That sort of policy is included in the use of force policy that you all have in front of you, the Lexipol policy. But I added this because the medical aid and response policy 433 that you should have in front of you, there is some language about our duty as it relates to sick or injured persons, when to seek medical clearance, when to call for an ambulance. So I think the two tie in together. So not only does the use of force policy have language in there about our duty to render aid to injured persons, but this is sort of a standalone policy that we don't currently have, Alder Boyd. We don't currently have sort of a standalone policy like this. So this is all new, and I don't have anything to compare it to. So this would be new policy that we would implement that coincides with what I believe this body asked for review.
Questions? Brian?
It's more of clarification. I haven't been connected to public safety as much since my last time here. And it has to do with opioid medication. Are all of our officers trained and carry medication in their squads?
No, we're working on that. We're working with our medical director and the fire chief to get us training to have that equipment with us and ready. We currently have it available to us in our police districts in case we ourselves are handling evidence and have to render aid to ourselves. It's available for us to use in all the rigs potentially if fire needs assistance, but no, each of us don't have individually issued Narcan, for example. We're working on it.
Okay. I just see that as a very top priority for, just turn on the daily news. And so if there's anything that this body can do to help move that, I know there's only so much time in a day. I just understand the significant importance of officers having it in their squad. When you show up, there's no time to wait. So.
We, we're often the first time there, especially for overdoses. Those get what's called toned out, all of our police radios all over the county. So if it's a Monona officer or a county deputy or a McFarland officer or a Madison officer who happens to be in the area and we have that resource available, the officer will likely respond. I come from an agency where even myself as a captain, I had Narcan. I had to give it back, and I was reluctant to give it back because then it was coming to an agency where the officers didn't all have it. Well, we're getting there. But what I can tell you is that there's sort of different lines of philosophy as to how Narcan is administered. Again, I came from an agency where we received the training, but we were authorized to administer the Narcan after an assessment of somebody without sort of rescue breaths or CCR, which is, do an assessment, are they not breathing? Do you have evidence of an opioid overdose and administer your Narcan? I think that where our medical director is looking to go is a little bit more in depth than that. And that has to do with some of the incidents that have occurred throughout the nation where Narcan was administered probably when it should have been.
Anyone else? I can't always see down the end.
I know,
so
sorry.
I'm not calling on you.
Like it blind.
Call out. I think we need to move this table around a little bit more.
Flags.
Yeah, or have a flag.
Crossing
We took them all off the street.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any other questions, so thank you, Chief.
We'll be ready next time.
Okay. And the next item is the ADA plan. Do we need a resolution to table that, or
It's first read, so no.
first read? No, we'll just, thank you, Doug, I'm glad you're on top of these things.
Well, if we don't end up doing a first read, well, next time we'll do.
That's the only thing. Because next time you still want to be a first read.
Yeah.
So I think we would want to table it. Then.
Table it, sure.
Yeah, I'll move to table.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I would just offer to people that it is really big, as you know, if you can look through it. I would focus on the big parks and the big stuff, and not like all the things in the bathrooms, height of signs. But all these, it's important, but I think our level is more like Winnequa, Huska, Oneida, Maywood. Well, Maywood's not really covered in there because it's going to be changed somewhat.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's,
Well, and I think this was very helpful.
yeah.
This, I don't know if everybody saw this, but telling you what the really big issues are and the
Yep.
smaller ones too, so. Okay, well then, that's the last of our action or non-action items. Moving on to reports of committees, commissions, et cetera. Are there any updates or discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? Anybody? I guess Mark, just part of that. I know Mark sent an email. Did you hear from everybody about when people can meet with Nehemiah?
think I heard pretty much everyone except for just a couple people.
I think
I'm one of those people.
I'm one of those people too.
You could
Sorry.
respond to Mark so we could get that on
Yes,
Nehemiah's
totally
calendar.
sorry.
That's fine.
And I am still looking for people who would like to serve on the implementation committee for the DEI report. I'm holding that, those applications open until the 29th, because it's going to be in the newsletter one more time this week, and I'll put it on the lowdown when I record later this week, so we'll see what we get. Any updates or discussion on sustainability efforts?
Mayor, could I just
Sure.
amplify something you just said related to DEI? For those in the room and listening beyond, I think it's important to understand that the plan is written, and folks on this committee, this group of folks to implement, would not be writing the plan. And so there might be folks in the community who feel that they are not qualified to be on such a committee because of the background that they bring to that work. And I just want to encourage people to apply for the committee. It's important work, and those on the committee would really be just moving the plan as written, moving it forward.
The recommendations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I just follow up on that? Yeah. Just to be clear, my understanding is the implementation committee would not be doing the implementation either. They would be overseeing the implementation.
Depending on what they're implementing, what
Right.
they decide to implement, I guess. Yeah, I think it's going to be
Right.
case-by-case basis.
Right.
Yes.
But I just want to stress that it's not something that would require someone to be an expert in.
No.
In certain things, because, they in most cases might be working with either city staff or working with, overseeing city staff work, or overseeing what committees or commissions or boards might be taking on.
That's correct.
Right.
And Nehemiah will be facilitating
Right.
the meetings, so they won't be the committee won't just be out there on their own without any direction.
Right.
So, and I think I've included all that information in the announcements too, but it's always good to reiterate that. So if you know of anyone, please ask them to fill out one of our application forms. Any updates or discussion on sustainability efforts? Teresa?
I'll mention something that the Sustainability Committee will be really digging into the plan that this body passed, different people in the room at the time, but the plan that was passed, and just really looking through it and checking off items that have already been completed and looking at ways that we can move forward on other items.
Anything else? Okay, committee reports. Alder Moore.
I would just say that, as many in Monona know, the Transit Commission has been reviewing proposal from Madison Metro over the last several months, working with city staff and working with the Transit Commission and Madison Metro, who have offered transit through Monona that would represent a pretty significant shift for the city of Monona in terms of our transit services. There'll be 2 public information meetings, one this week on the 20th, Thursday night. That's Thursday night at the high school at 6 p.m.
It's at the library.
Library.
Sorry.
Yep.
I got
Wrong meeting.
I got the wrong meeting, yeah. At the library, sorry. And on the 25th, which is Tuesday, so Thursday the 20th at the library and Tuesday the 25th at the library at 6 p.m. Please come. Representatives from Madison Metro will be there in addition to members of the Transit Commission. We really want the community's feedback. There will also be another information meeting, public information meeting held at the Senior Center.
November 16th.
Date to be up.
November 16th.
November 16th.
10 o'clock.
Thank you.
At
What
10
time,
o'clock.
Mark?
10 o'clock.
16th at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. Thank you. We have been very busy at the Plan Commission with kinds of interesting new developments proposed for the city. I would encourage residents to go and check out Plan Commission videos if you're interested in developments that have been proposed to the city. While I was away, I think there was a meeting that was, 4+ hours long?
It's long.
And it's not unusual. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Those two.
Okay. Alder DePula.
Nothing. We just talked about traffic, so.
Alder Holmquist.
No report.
Alder Wood.
Parks Board met and we talked about the ADA transition plan and the use of the tennis/pickleball courts. MPO met and among other things officially adopted the new TIP, so including the funding for Nichols Road.
Great. Alder Thomas.
No report.
Alder Rademacher.
Community media met, and we talked quite a bit about the Adopt a Watt campaign and other ways to really dig into fundraising. And then the Sustainability Committee met, and aside from reviewing the plan, which is really the larger project, we're still focusing on individual projects throughout the year that sort of correlate to seasons and seasonal information and education. We're right in the middle of all the leaves falling from the trees, so the leaf management campaign will be really kicking off with a lot of PSAs on VMO. And Landmarks Commission also met, and we welcomed one of our new staff members, Thor Jepson, to the committee, which was really nice to meet him. I'm very happy with the hire. Good job.
Library Director Claringbold, do you have anything to? Looks like you brought a whole speech.
I wanted to come tonight because the mayor, especially, and council have been very patient with me regarding my reports, which has been lacking, to say the least. So I just wanted to very briefly give you a quick overview of the previous one. So just give me 3 minutes. For items being circulated, it's about 16,000 for September, so it's still increasing, coming back from the pandemic numbers. Visits, we had a little over 7,500. That's been fluctuating. Summers are peak up. Peak months are starting to dip down due to school, but still good numbers. We had about 100 people attend adult programs, about 400 people attend children's programs, and 20 people for teen programs, which is higher than last year for those. But again, during these last 2 years, data is kind of worthless. I may be blunt, just because everything's been skewed. We hired a new circulation supervisor, which I'm very excited about. That person starts November 7th, I believe. Staff have been amazing, taking up all the other duties that circulation supervisor normally would be doing to make sure the library is still running, doing all the problem items, calling other libraries for other issues, and just basically staffing the desk. You may have noticed the blue lockers on the lower level. Those were purchased with ARPA funds via the South Central Library system that will provide 24-hour item pickups for anyone. It's almost ready to go. SCLS is still working with some of the bugs in the software, but essentially a patron can call the library and say, "Oh, my name's so-and-so, I'd like my whole items to be placed in the locker." Staff will put it there. You can come after your evening jog at 3 a.m. and put your library card and scan it, and whatever locker your items were assigned to will just pop open. You'll reach and grab your items and go. So other libraries, more in rural communities, they've been using this, especially during the pandemic. It was very popular. I'm curious how it will be utilized in Monona, but we'll do our best to promote it and get everyone going. The Canopy video streaming platform that we have, that usage keeps going up, so if you haven't used it yet, your library card will get you free access to film streaming, and these are not just like quadruple A movies. It's from documentaries to award-winning to Criterion Collection. And lastly, we had the ducks cleaned on September 29th, and I don't know if you've seen the photos.
We have.
I'm very, very
Brad shared
thankful that they
them.
were cleaned. I'm very thankful for Brad Bruin to suggest it and push for it, because I'm trying to forget that I breathed in all that for the last 5-some years. So that is all. Thank you for your time, and I will get the report in next time.
Thank
What was
you.
the name of the film program?
Canopy.
Canopy.
Yes.
Mayor? I just want to say, Ryan, before you go, what you may lack in reports, I have to applaud you for, you and the staff for, like, how much you overdo it and do with programming here. Like, every monthly library newsletter that comes out, I'm just blown away by the level of programming that you guys are offering the community. You know, really impressed with what you're doing around DEI as well, and really you've taken lead on that from the very beginning in terms of signage and but now with your programming and stuff too. And so I just want to applaud you and your staff for that, because I don't think we say enough of that. So you know,
Thank you very much. I'll be sure to
yeah.
pass it on to the staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief?
I have a thank you and an announcement, I promise. First of all, thank you. Our golf outing was a couple weekends ago. One day with the Canine Fund netted over $10,000 for a one-day event. So wonderful, wonderful, generous community we live and work in. So thank you. That unit needs those funds to run. We don't, other than the officer, the vehicle costs, it's entirely funded by the Canine Fund. So thank you all. So those of you who shared, contributed, all the above, thank you. And I don't golf, but I was there smiling and shaking hands and thanking people too, and watching Packers play. Everyone else was on the golf cart, and of course. And then second, an announcement. Speaking of events, please stop by if you are out trick-or-treating. Some of you might be, Walter Thomas.
You think I might, because I'm in costume, I might be.
No. Stop by the police department. We are a trick-or-treat stop. There's plenty of candy as donated by folks and businesses for us to give out. And I will be dressed up as somebody not a police officer. So come and see what I will be dressed as giving.
As Kathy? You're going to dress as Kathy?
And what time?
I'm not that classy.
What time are we supposed to do this?
Our recommended hours are 5 to 7.
And are you going to be inside City Hall
I will
or
be
outside?
Outside, next to a squad car that will be decorated for Halloween.
Oh,
Have you asked Jake and the library to send a blast out to the kids in the community?
We will do that. I mean, we do so on social media.
They may be willing. I mean, you want the kids to know about it, so.
We have plenty of candy.
It just, I know
is it in the e-newsletter too?
I think we still have
Put something else?
Yeah, the community media is putting it in the newsletter, and I think also PSAs are being recorded now. Yeah.
That's right. We have our Land and Florida community relations officers been working with that. So.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I have.
Cool.
As promised. Thank you.
City Clerk?
Just that absentee voting starts next Tuesday, the 25th, and the report.
Okay, Mark?
Just to remember, Committee of the Whole is the 27th of October, November 3rd. I'll send a appointment out for that, and I believe you'll probably get the budgets probably either Friday or Monday of next week. So we'll have a balanced budget.
We will.
Mark, you said you're going to send appointments out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Are we starting at 5:30?
Yeah, we'll start at 5:30.
And we'll provide something to eat then, as we usually do. So anything else?
No, that's
Okay. I just had a couple things. The San Damiano public information meeting tomorrow. It starts at 7 at the high school, so please come if you can. We've posted possible quorum notifications for that and the Metro meeting, so there's no problem with as many council members coming as can. And then I just wanted to tell you, Mark and I had a meeting last week with Miller Communications, who were talking about discussing hiring to help with communications for the referendum. So we may be coming soon, might be at one of the committee, the whole meetings, we think, with a contract if that all works out. So just you're aware, we got to hit the ground running here, so there's a lot to do, even though it's 6 months away or whatever. So, anything else? Doug?
Yeah, I forgot to mention, I think it was mentioned earlier, but the Fall Festival over the weekend was just, I think it was the best one ever, and sort of really well organized. My son was there with his candle company and sold a bunch of candles.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. It was a really good setup. With, it was a nice fall day. I mean, it was
Perfect
cool,
day.
but
Doug,
sunny.
how many staff people do they have setting that up? I mean, it looked, it looked like.
Everybody.
That's amazing.
I don't, all the park staff. I mean, Jake was out there.
It was, I mean, I wasn't down there, but I went by and it was immense. I mean, and just lots of things going on.
I want to know how many pies.
That's what I was going to
all I
ask.
know.
Yeah, did anyone go to the pie event?
Well, it was right there.
Yeah, great.
I
Outdoors.
stopped. They have little samples
That's so
for a
interesting.
ticket, or they have quite a few
Because
pies.
it used to be indoors, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never ran it before.
Yeah, it was really great. Yeah.
I think, did they have some teams volunteering to help, like swim team or maybe, there were kids helping at some, like at the pie thing and at a couple of the other tents I know. And I didn't know if maybe they're guards or something. I don't think they're
Yeah, I'm not sure.
regular employees. So. Anyway. Nancy?
Sorry, I was just going to, as a follow-up, Mayor, to something you mentioned, I just want to make clear to people, the meeting that's happening tomorrow night for San Damiano is a public information meeting as well, and it's specifically MSA Professional Services, who are facilitating the master planning process, will be discussing the survey results, and we're definitely looking for more community input. They're going to discuss the master planning process, and we'll be looking for more community input. So if you have any interest in San Damiano, please come on out. This is only the first of what will be many public meetings, but it's important. 7 o'clock at the high school.
Teresa?
Aldermore, regarding community input, the survey is closed online.
It
right?
is.
Yeah. So by community input, you're looking for other mechanisms, not the survey.
We're looking for people to attend the meeting,
Attend the
to
meeting,
react
okay.
to what's been said in the survey, and to also provide
Okay.
additional input, and there'll be other surveys to come, but this particular,
Sure.
I mean, this is an 18-month process,
Yeah.
so we're going to be getting lots of community input along the way.
I think we're planning on having like 3-minute speaking
Yeah.
slots for people who have something they'd like
Yeah.
to
And
say.
And I would add, I took some time today just to read through all the information that's on the mymonona.com website. It is plentiful, so folks could read up before heading over to the meeting. That would probably be helpful.
Anyone else? Brian?
It has to do with your next agenda item, which is appointments, and I just wanted to kind of foreshadow that this is still something that I know I threw out there earlier, and I haven't had the time to meet with the mayor to go over the kind of initial kind of a draft template of looking at how potentially to frame appointments that are, the appointments are a mayor appointment, but we're asked to vote on them. And so there was a desire that I had that I put out there, and I just hadn't had the time to follow up with the mayor yet. So
Yes, I've asked Alder Holmquist to contact me a couple of times, but haven't heard from him.
life has been
But Alder Rademacher has, and I have discussed this appointment, and Kristen actually came to a sustainability meeting last week.
Fabulous.
To check in and just watch, because we were having a discussion on expectations of the Sustainability Committee and their role and that kind of thing. So anyway, next item is appointment of Kristen Gunther to the Sustainability Committee, effective immediately through April 2023. Is there a motion to approve this?
I move to approve it.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.